In a dramatic rhetorical escalation, President Donald Trump has declared that Ukraine cannot achieve victory by fighting a purely defensive war and must be prepared to strike targets within Russian territory. This significant shift in public posture comes as Ukrainian forces face immense pressure on the Eastern Front, particularly around the besieged city of Pokrovsk. The president's remark, delivered with characteristic forcefulness, suggests a growing impatience within the White House over the protracted nature of the conflict and a belief that a more aggressive military strategy is necessary to alter the battlefield calculus in Kyiv's favor. In a statement, Trump drew an analogy to sports, asserting that a team with a fantastic defense that is not allowed to play offense has no chance of winning. He argued that the same principle applies to the war, directly criticizing the previous administration's perceived limitations on Ukraine's ability to fight back. This public pronouncement signals a potential major change in United States policy, which has historically been cautious about the use of American-supplied weapons or strikes deep inside Russia due to the inherent risk of escalation. The president's comments have ignited a firestorm of debate both domestically and internationally, forcing allies and adversaries alike to reassess the potential trajectory of the war. The implication is clear. The Trump administration may be moving towards endorsing and perhaps actively supporting a Ukrainian strategy that takes the fight directly to the aggressor, a move that would fundamentally change the rules of engagement and carry profound strategic consequences for the entire region. The strategic thinking behind this pivot appears rooted in the president's conviction that a credible threat to Russian assets on its own soil is the only way to force a change in Moscow's calculations. Proponents of this view argue that Russia has been able to wage war with a degree of impunity, launching devastating missile and drone attacks from sanctuaries within its border without fear of symmetrical retaliation. Allowing Ukraine to strike military logistic hubs, airbase, and troops concentrations inside Russia could disrupt command and control, degrade Russia's ability to sustain its offensive operations, and raise the domestic costs of the war for the Kremlin. However, this approach is fraught with peril. The administration of Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth is undoubtedly weighing the immense risk. Hegseth, who has consistently stated that the administration is committed to peace and that a negotiated settlement serves American national interests, faces a complex challenge. While acknowledging Russia as the aggressor, his public statements have focused on achieving peace, even if the outcome is not preferable to all parties, reflecting a desire to avoid deeper American entanglement. A policy that encouraged strikes on Russian territory could be seen as running counter to this objective, potentially triggering a massive and unpredictable Russian response. The Pentagon must consider the possibility of Russia resorting to more destructive conventional weapons or even tactical nuclear assets, a nightmare scenario that military planners have sought to avoid since the conflict inceptions. This evolving stance on offensive operations is deeply intertwined with President Trump's profound skepticism about the current state of peace negotiations. He has increasingly voiced the opinion that talks are premature and unlikely to yield a favorable outcome for Ukraine as long as Kyiv is negotiating from a position of battlefield weakness. The president has publicly set a 2-week deadline to assess whether the ongoing peace talk can produce a tangible result, after which he has indicated he may take a different approach. This self-imposed timeline creates immense pressure on all parties and reflects his transactional view of diplomacy, where leverage is paramount. His administration appears to be stepping back from direct involvement in organizing initial talks, insisting that a bilateral meeting between the Russian and Ukrainian president must occur first, before any trilateral summit involving the United States. This wait-and-see approach is a departure from more active diplomatic engagement and places the onus on the two warring parties to find common ground, a prospect that seems to be more given the current intensity of the fighting. The president's view, echoed by some in his administration, is that without a significant shift in military momentum, any peace deal would amount to a de facto surrender for Ukraine, ratifying Russian territorial gains. Therefore, empowering Ukraine to strike back more forcibly is seen not just as a military strategy, but as a necessary precondition for creating the leverage needed for meaningful negotiation in the future. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is at the center of this diplomatic balancing act. Rubio has been the primary public face of the administration's peace effort, consistently stating that a lasting agreement will require concession from both sides. In recent interviews, he has emphasized that if one side gets everything it wants, it is not a peace deal, but a surrender. And neither side is close to that point. He has acknowledged the difficulty of bringing the two sides together, but has maintained that the administration is making progress and that dialogue is essential. The president's more bellicose rhetoric complicates Rubio's diplomatic mission. He must now navigate a landscape where his own president is publicly questioning the very peace process he's tasked with leading. This creates a dual-track policy that can be confusing to allies and adversaries. On one hand, Rubio speaks of the necessity of compromise and dialogue. On the other, the president advocates for military escalation that could render such dialogue impossible. This apparent contradiction might be a deliberate good cops, bad cops strategy, designed to pressure Moscow by presenting it with two undesirable alternatives. Negotiate with Rubio under threats of the consequences of Trump's more aggressive instincts, or face a more heavily armed and unshackled Ukrainian military. European allies, in particular, are watching these developments with considerable anxiety, with some reportedly humoring the president's peace effort in the hope that he will eventually conclude that Russia is not a sincere partner and adopt a tougher stance. The international reaction has been a mixture of alarm and quiet encouragement. Nations on NATO's eastern flank, who feels most threatened by Russian aggression, may privately welcome a more robust American stance that allows Ukraine to degrade the Russian war machine more effectively. However, key Western European allies are likely to express deep reservations, fearing that strikes inside Russia could lead to a wider continental war. They have consistently urged restraint, concerned that a direct competition between NATO and Russia could be the ultimate consequence of such an escalation. The Kremlin has predictably reacted with fury, warning of serious consequences and asymmetric retaliation should Ukrainian attacks on its territory with American weapons intensify. This dynamic places the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, in a critical position. Her intelligence assessment of Moscow's red line and potential response to Ukrainian strikes will be vital in informing the president's decision. The intelligence community must provide a clear-eyed analysis of the risk contained by political consideration to ensure that any policy shift is based on a full understanding of the potential blowback. The credibility of American intelligence and by extension American foreign policy is on the line. The debate over allowing Ukraine to use American supplied long-range weapons, such as the Army Tactical Missile System ATACMS, to hit targets deep inside Russia has been ongoing. While previous policy had been restrictive, the current administration's rhetoric suggests these restrictions could be loosened or lifted entirely. This would provide Ukraine with the capability to target critical Russian military infrastructure far behind the front line. The recent battlefield setbacks, particularly the Russian breakthrough at Pokrovsk, have added a sense of urgency to these discussions. The thinking in Kyiv and increasingly in Washington is that the strategic defensive is no longer tenable. To survive and ultimately prevail, Ukraine must be able to impose costs on Russia that are felt not just by soldiers on the front line, but by the military and political leadership in Moscow. The president's statements reflect a fundamental judgment that the risk of inaction, of allowing Russia to continue its grinding advance, now outweigh the risk of a carefully managed escalation. Whether this judgment proves correct will determine the course of the war and the stability of Europe for the foreseeable future. The coming weeks, shaped by the president's self-imposed deadline for the success of peace talks, will be a critical period of decision. The world is watching to see if the Trump administration will follow through on its assertive rhetoric and truly unchain the Ukrainian military, and what the consequences of that momentous decision will be. Many of my listeners, like 70%, haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, and so many of you don't even know that you haven't subscribed. And that is actually what makes the show going. It's almost like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask again and again, because it enables us to grow and grow and grow. And we're going for the long haul here. And listen, if this is your first time listening to World Global Conflict, you don't have to subscribe. You guys, your first one's on me. But if you have watched this show before, it's like you are freeloaded now. So all I would ask is If you have seen this show before and you like it, help me help my team. Hit that subscribe and like button now, and we will continue to build this show for you. That I swear. Thank you to all of you guys who have subscribed. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. That's all for me for today. I will see you soon. Bye for now.